Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Living on Blockchain. Today, we are speaking to Raghu Mohan. He's the OG himself of the Web3 space, even though he is a little uncomfortable with that nickname that I have sort of given him. But honestly, he's probably one of the most understated, humble, real builders in the Web3 space. He's been there from the start, and he's seen so many startups from the ideation to, scaling journey. I have immense amount of respect for him, and I was just very happy at the prospect of being able to interview him. I do believe that this was a very, very insightful conversation and a lot for everybody to take in from. So let's go ahead and deep dive right in.
Hi, Raghu. Thank you so much for taking all the time to speak to us. How are you doing today?
Doing good, and thanks for having me. I don't know what I've done to be on podcasts and things like that, but always a pleasure speaking to you.
You're just always like selling yourself short. You're just so humble, and that is sort of a little bit of a rare breed in this space. But you're one of the you movers and shakers of this space. You're doing so much, but we'll get into that in a bit. But first, let's start with a bit of an intro as to how you got into Web3. Tell us a little about that.
I got into Web3 by accident. That is probably the best way of defining this whole journey for me. But I think this was back in 2016. I just finished my stint with a tech company called Udacity. It was a dream company of mine. I was a part of Sebastian Thrun's first CS 101 that he did from Stanford. And I said, if he ever is hiring in India, I'll go work for him. And he was, and I went and
Right.
And it was a lot of fun. I was their first hire and learned a lot about scaling a new market for a Silicon Valley, unicorn back then. We 5x their paid user count here. And I think at that time, as it is with most jobs, spend enough time in a job and get to a seniority, every job becomes a sales job. So that's
right. Yeah, that's true.
That's basically what happened with me. And I wanted to kind of, figure out what I really wanted to do. I had spent most of my time before that with startups. So I knew that at some point I will, do something along those lines. And this was when I was like, okay, let me ply my trade of being a growth marketer and a content strategist and, that sort of, those sort of roles in for consulting with other startups who probably need that right now. So I started consulting with a few dev houses, a few communities, a few early stage startups, and someone came along and said, hey, can you write white papers? I was like, sure, I can write white papers. And then they asked me, do you know what an ICO? I was like, do you know what an ICO is? And I was like, yeah, I know what an ICO is. And that kind of got me into it. And, 6 white papers later, I was completely red-pilled into this entire space. I was clued in with most things that was happening at that time. And one thing, really kind of stood out, which was the lack of developers and engineers in this space. I always looked at Web3 or
Right.
crypto back in the old days, as it was called, as an engineering movement. And this entire potential, multi-trillion-dollar market was held together by a shoestring of engineers. And that I thought was a big enough problem to solve. And, I had done a lot of good work in the developer side of things during a previous stint with a company called HackerEarth, and where I scaled their developer community from like 3,000 developers back then to about 900,000 developers by the time I left. Today, the platform has 6 million developers on it. So I'm very proud of the time that I spent there. It also taught me how to evangelize new stuff to devs. And India had all the devs that you can ever want, right? So that's what I started, which kind of ended up being this thing called Lumos Labs. And yeah, that's pretty much how I got into it. And I think the main intention kind of bungling along the way while writing those white papers was, I think the conversation for Web3 should kind of move from profits and trading to wealth and job creation, which I thought was something that could do my country a lot of good. And that's what I do for a living now.
Yeah, this is awesome. You totally sold yourself short and very humble in the beginning. You've been associated with such big brands, Udacity and then HackerEarth. So, I think they did community before community was a thing, right? Even though it was not Web3 or crypto, as you said, but they've been fantabulous, absolutely. So, what was like the first white paper that you actually wrote? Because you mentioned that, 6-7 papers down and you were completely in the game.
not very proud of it, but I wrote the nucleus vision white paper. But
Uh-huh.
so,
Okay.
yeah, that was a lot of fun. But I really thought that the concept was great, right? Like an incentivized
Hmm.
ad network for brick and mortar retail. Kind of, it made a lot of sense from a crypto use case standpoint, but then what you write in white papers and what
Sense.
gets
Yeah.
executed in the real world are two very different things, you know. So,
Two different things. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, it's very interesting. No, but I do agree with you. It's a very use case, very understandably good use case for especially for crypto. The incentivizing ad networks. So no, I do understand and I agree with you here. Where what gets written in white papers and what gets executed are like two different realities altogether. You tend to like I've listened to. We've been on so many panels together, etc. And I listen to you talking. You talk with a lot of fervor when it comes to building for the country, right? And nowadays there are a lot of people who are moving out of the country because of the policy that has kind of come in. Do you have a take on that?
You put me on the spot, Rita. Think about this quite a bit.
No, but this is like the very obvious question. It's right there. Like, even I'm actually on your side. I do feel that the other places that people are kind of, moving to, they are very, I don't know, they're very transactional, and there is something special about building while you're sitting in your home country and you're building for a global audience. But I do know that, you would have some thoughts here. So do
Yeah.
chip in.
Sure. Let me put this in the most nuanced way possible. Right? So, some background would help here. I've come from a defense family. My father is still serving in the Air Force as an Air Marshal, and a lot of the whole patriotism beyond patriotism for the land is something that I've kind of always seen as a kid, and I'm very proud of where I'm from. I also know the potential of the country when it comes to innovating. I was also one of the very early team members at Your Story. I was like their second full-time editor. And there were times where like there would be days where my stories used to go out because we didn't have enough writers back then. And I'll never forget some of the things that I've seen, right? Like Sachin and Binny Bansal from Flipkart standing outside Higginbotham's in Bangalore, handing out pamphlets to people saying, hey, go buy the same book on Flipkart. Bhavish Agarwal coming to our office and installing the Ola app on our phones.
Wow.
Those type of stories I thought was very inspiring. I feel like we as a country have a massive chip on our shoulder. There's so much that we want to prove, and we have all the talent in the world to do it. And I think like at startups, in my day job right now is evaluating, startups to kind of take into BuildersTribe, which I can touch upon later. And the one thing that I'm always looking for is what's the chip on this founder's shoulder, because this will make them kind of go through words. And India as a country has got a lot of it. Crypto and Web3 seems to be a chip on the shoulder kind of movement for a lot of the people who are tired with how the Web2 world essentially works. And it seems like a great marriage for our founder ethos that is prevalent in India, and also the fact that Web3 itself kind of resonates with that same mindset. It just feels like such a great opportunity for India to kind of take pole position. And we're already seeing that. If the most used network outside of Ethereum is an Indian-built project, that should give you a sense of the kind of head start that we have in this space. And I really want India to win in this. Now, when it comes to moving abroad, it's mainly kind of coming from regulatory uncertainty. I actually am pretty pro regulations, because at least then I'll know what I can't do. Right?
Exactly. Yeah, that is what I feel as well. Yeah. At least then, you wouldn't be like all of a sudden, like with ethics, at least that was my perception. What had happened was like overnight, we were out of a business, right? So when that RBI order had come in, like we couldn't serve our customers and users anymore. And that is like the worst case scenario. At least if the policy is there, you know what you can do and what is beyond that ambit. So you kind of think ahead.
Correct. And I wish it comes sooner, right? Like at least, and most of my friends who have moved out, they're very clear about the fact that the second we know that there's clarity on regulations, we'll comply and come back. It's just, the hassle of living in the unknown, something that scares a lot of founders, and I empathize with that. But again, like we can't miss out on this. Not again, right? Like we missed out on the on the tech wave. We became a glorified back office for that. We missed out on the hardware wave. We almost missed out on computers before that. And here we've actually got a start, and I really think that we can't let this go down. But again, it all comes from the fact that I'm stupidly patriotic and I want to do something about it.
No, it's good to be patriotic. Even I feel very strongly about this. I feel like we are from India and we should be building here, and we should be adding, reserves here rather than sort of moving abroad. And obviously that causes like immense brain drain in various ways, because it's like a ripple effect, right? It's not just a founder that's going to be moving out. It's like an entire, horde of people who will be moving out, who will be following the founder. So we don't necessarily want that at all. But having said that, and keeping that aside, now with this kind of prohibitive sort of taxation that has come into place, and yesterday I think I was reading in the news that our finance minister kind of made a comment about how, crypto is primarily, the fear is that it will be primarily used for terrorist funding and for money laundering. Don't you think that the environment is becoming increasingly restrictive for like the founders to continue business here, or for Indian users to be dabbling in crypto?
Looks like it. And, I have a lot of empathy for the regulator as well. It's not the regulator's job to stay at pace with technology, and this is expecting them to do so generally will result in half-baked regulations as well. So I think they should take time, but also I think they're letting the media off pretty easy here. The sensationalism around anything crypto in India is so big; it does more harm than good. With respect to the taxations, I honestly don't have thoughts, because personally it doesn't affect me. I don't trade, or I don't invest in crypto in that sense, right? And whatever the taxes are, I'm happy paying it. It pays my dad at that level, so I'm okay with contributing. And but yeah, I can see how this affects us in the short term, and all I can ask for is clarity. Once there's clarity, we work with it.
Yeah, that's a good take to have. I think that is the kind of policy that I have taken as well, that as long as there is clarity, that's a good thing. And then you kind of are on the side of caution, and you make sure that you're complying, being compliant everywhere. And then you can serve your end user better as well, right? There is not that instability kind of goes away from the user's mind as well.
That's true. Yeah, again, the conversation is all about crypto being an asset and things like that. It's such a powerful technology, and I mean, the kind of cool stuff that people are building with it that I see every day, which is insanely useful. I'll give you an example, right? Like this decentralized video communications tool. If you hear the founder's story as to why they're doing it in a peer-to-peer manner, they'll tell you because their cousin sits in a tier 2 village. Internet broadband connections are not that great, and centralized solutions like Zoom basically have a longer ping rate because their data centers are sitting somewhere far away. If the same thing was peer-to-peer, network topology is shorter, and I would be able to have the same kind of call quality that I'm having on broadband, but at lower bandwidths. So his cousin, who's living in like a tier 2 city, can consume online content and learn better. Even though they don't have access to best facilities. So I think that's inspiring as hell. And this is the sort of stuff that should be spoken about more. And I'm not denying that wrongdoing doesn't happen in crypto. It's there. Yeah. Any gray area attacks the worst people also. And point is that, we should stop that, but at the same time, not at the cost of all of these cool things that are being built. And, really encourage that, more of that building side of things that perhaps is not being spoken about at all.
That is what is kind of missing in this entire startup story. Like people kind of tend to focus so much about the funding aspect and the big numbers and the IPL ads and the the flamboyancy is kind of associated with Web3 and crypto, but people aren't really talking about why is this product or platform being built, and what is like the story behind it. I feel that is completely, or at least missing to quite an extent from the conversation, the discourse that we have.
I feel it's too non-controversial. It doesn't get you enough page views. And trust me, as a former journalist, I know this. This struggle is real. But I think there is a great disservice being done every time we speak about the next big sensational scam that happens and forget the thousands of great things that are happening in the space, which is good for, the community, good for the country. And I hope that changes. It is changing a lot. It's not 2017 reporting was bad, but now
very bad. Yeah.
now it's getting a little better.
Yes, I'm glad. So now, now talking about better things, what are the kind of projects or platforms that you're really excited about currently? Like, have you come across thousands of pitches on a weekly basis? So to tell me a few of them that, really got you excited.
Thousands of pitches weekly, I don't see. That those are polygon numbers.
But with,
uh,
you'll get there then, aspiring number, BuildersTribe will get there. But maybe hundreds. At least you guys are incubating and you are helping so many projects, and everybody seems to know about you guys and is connected in some way or the other. But there must be some projects that must have caught your eye. They're doing something exceptionally different.
Yeah, so I have to be a little diplomatic here. I love all the projects that I'm working with right now. But my personal thesis for projects that I like to be involved in are around infrastructure and community. I think infrastructure projects are a no-brainer in the sense that anything that provides DApp infrastructure that allows it to scale a lot to internet demand, that I think is generally pretty powerful. I've had the pleasure of working with people like Bioeconomy, people like Covalent, and these are kind of projects that I really think are fundamentally needed for the space if products and economies are to be built on top of them. And I think I understand that space a little bit as well, because of the past work that I've done. I really think that community organization by aligning incentives is also really, really good. Part of the endeavor at BuildersTribe is also something that we want to be able to build this community of mentors and investors for Web3 startups. And how do we align incentives within that so organization and delivery, it becomes more efficient in that sense. So these two areas are super interesting for me, and projects along these come. You can't just build an infrastructure project out of by launching a token. You really need to kind of understand the base level workings of layer ones, layer twos, protocol layers on top of them to be able to launch such a project on which others can build. So I think we're still early there, and I'm seeing a lot of good projects coming from that side. Decentralized file storage, for example, like it's criminally underrated. And today, the cheapest file storage and compute you can buy are from decentralized options, and not enough people speaking about it. And and on the other hand, on the community side of things, I think we're seeing elements of that with gaming guilds, but and some DAOs. But again, these, I think we're like really early, and it feels like a hype cycle at this point for the most part. But first principle thinking in these projects, there are a few that I get to meet every week, and couldn't be more excited for them.
Yeah, what you said about file storage, I think there is a wrong kind of concept that is there in people's head that when you kind of store anything on blockchain, it becomes very costly. And then there are these wonderful storage apps and platforms that are being built in a decentralized way that are actually, as you said, they're cheaper. But this is something that is, I think, maybe because of the Ethereum gas fee aspect, I don't know how did this kind of got built up. I think last weekend, or I think I was speaking at this college fest, which was for VIIT, I think. And then they were also kind of, talking about how storage, the co-panelist was sort of not sure about how, how this can be cheaper. And how he kind of had this opinion that, it would cost a lot if you are kind of storing. Obviously, images would, cost a lot, but his entire notion was that anything being stored on blockchain would, be far more costly. So that this is something that is, I think, it's a concept which is just sort of gotten embedded in people's head, which might not be completely correct.
I mean, it is not completely correct. Like decentralized file storage and storing on an L1 are two different things, and
exactly.
that difference you have to go and explain to people, but we should urge them to
that is exactly what I was trying to do, that but on that particular event also I was trying to explain to him that it's different when you're storing it on Ethereum, and it's different when you're looking at other L2 solutions. and it would be one of the cheaper options that you have. But I think that we are just still so early. People look at Ethereum as their go-to for everything, and now there are so many wonderful layer 2 solutions as well, and now people are also building like layer 0 solutions. Do you have like an opinion on that?
About how early this space is, or on
both? Take up both. Take up both.
Yeah, I mean, definitely it's quite early, right? Like most of the times, I've had the benefit of spending some time in this space. It's very important to kind of go and reread the whole constructs at the base layer, right? Like consensus, distributed versus decentralized, all of these things. It's good to reinforce it in your mind, because I come from a Web 2 world myself, and I think anyone who's not a 17, 18-year-old is natively Web 2. And the true native Web3 guys are the people who are experiencing the internet in this way for the first time, right? I don't blame them. And being able to sit down and read these things, spend time with them, and kind of unlearn a lot of the things, a lot of what the way it was done back in the days is going to be crucial before these nuances become sorted out. Right. And as far as new innovations in, file storage specifically, or distributed compute specifically, I think we are still very, very early. I'm super excited about, players like Akash, scaling the network layer itself, and relay chain ecosystems like Cosmos and Polkadot, again, are super exciting. Yeah. There's a really different take on how decentralized ecosystems can be built with, rather than being multi-chain, there's this cross-chain conversation that's going on, which is all connected by this one relay chain. That I think is, it intuitively feels like it may work out better, given the amount of security risks that are there with this whole bridges that people are building between chains right now. Not to mention, their efficiencies as well. Again, like I think it all boils down, for the sake of keeping this conversation rather from going too technical, I think it's still really early, and I feel the markets have given us a way to do these fun experiments and kind of fail upwards while we figure out what really works. Very bullish about, generally quite interested in the D-Web, and have the fortune of working with a few companies in this space. So I'm quite excited to see what happens.
I love how bullish you are on the infrastructure aspect, because obviously that is like the foundational aspect, and people at times kind of glaze over it because it gets too technical. But I love what you said, that fail upwards and figure out, basically, because we are still in the iteration phase, like as an entire sector, right? We're just sort of figuring out, and everybody's tinkering, trying to see what really works.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, never a better time to enter the space. Strongly urge everyone listening to this to give this a shot.
Absolutely. I feel like a cult leader on most days, that I'm always asking people to join Web3 and, at least give it a shot. Like it's some new exciting cult, but it can be really exciting. There's another exciting thing that you sort of, insightful thing that you kind of pointed out. And this is something that I have been saying a lot, that, people who are coming in from Web 2 and into Web 3, there is no problem that they would as such face. The only problem that they will face are also people who are originally in Web3, that they have to unlearn a lot of things. There's so much happening every day. You have to unlearn so many ideas that you might have held, and there are better ways to do things. I think that is going to be the key difference. So the people who are going to make it in Web3. What do you think?
I mean, isn't that true for any new technology, right? Like I still remember when I joined your story, the reason why you would join a startup is because you didn't get placed from college. Today, that it's such an acceptable thing to do. And, the people who unlearned what it was to going to a job and spending the next 35 years doing the same thing versus building something that is insanely useful and owning a part of it to create wealth.
Yeah.
That was an unlearning that the early entrepreneurs from India had to do and show that it could be done. And it then becomes a norm. And your early winners are always the people who are open-minded enough about change and kind of having that why not mentality, as opposed to, having everything seems to be working fine. Why does this need to change? Right. And I think this is true for Web 2 guys. And quite honestly, it's a lot harder to do here, because even today, web solutions are more scalable relatively.
That's true.
And more efficient than Web3 solutions. And I can give you a developer's perspective, right? Because if I had taken up a job and especially this was back in the day when Hyperledger Fabric and Quorum and all of those private chains were a big deal, right? I spoke to a developer who'd been working on these chains for some time, and he told me that, look, man, if I had spent the same time in a Web2 company, at least I would have worked on something at scale, at something in production. I've spent the last 3 years just doing POCs, right? And that isn't taking me anywhere. And I think that it's that unlearning and that being open-minded enough in Web3 is a lot harder to do, given how advanced Web2 still is in most contexts of company building, of product building, right? And it is going to be hard. But the people who have accepted that, hey, this could be a new way of doing something a little more efficiently, it's going to be a lot harder. And I'm going to have to unlearn a lot of the things that I grew up thinking were the norm. Those are the people who I seem to have a better chance at, building something of significance here. And it's always been true. I've seen three waves, right? Like mobility was the first one that I saw, where everyone was kind of migrating from desktop web apps to mobile apps. Then cloud became like a really big conversation, as opposed to kind of housing all your data in a server farm which you owned inside your office. And then third bit is this Web2 to Web3 side of kind of things. And I think the guys who made it in the early days were the people who kind of came in and had a why not, and let me see how I can learn this ground up type of much. It's hard to do, but I think that's a fundamental prerequisite to build anything of significance in this space.
This can only come from somebody who's seen these multiple waves, like your perspective. As I said, in the beginning, that, you're kind of one of the OGs and you're selling yourself short here because you've seen the way Web2 has, kind of scales. And now, you're coming from that perspective that, okay, in Web3, it's a lot harder. And this is a new perspective for me as well, because, when I hear you saying it, I'm in complete agreement with you, but I never really thought of this myself, that because in Web3, everything is so early, like people are still iterating and figuring out what kind of does work or at least even fits. Web2 people have a better chance of unlearning and sort of, growing, because that is the scale at which it is at. Correct. It's such a wonderful perspective. Like, I never really thought of it like that way. I keep thinking about it that, okay, I'm running into a wall while scaling because things are different. But I never thought about how, it might be easier for the Web2 guys to actually unlearn and, sort of scale. So, yeah, that's a very interesting perspective to have.
Yeah, I'm very uncomfortable with that whole OG thing that, people
Don't be. I don't know what you've done so much. Experience matters. You've done so much. And, you know what you're talking about. And that is what I'm saying, that there is so much hot air in this space, especially that, there are a lot of people who there are a lot of builders, but there is a lot of hot air as well. And, you are somebody who's actually seen and scaled in Web2 as well as now you're in Web3 and you're such a facilitator here. So I don't understand, like, why would you not be okay with the tag of being the OG? You are. You've helped us.
Not really. Until I've contributed something fundamental in this space, I don't think anyone is an OG. And with that mindset, I think there are only like a handful of us who are, who can call themselves that. And also, like, OG is like original gangster, right? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Context that has.
That is what I know as well. But you are the original gangster of Web3. You were early. Yeah. So, you started off earlier than most. So, obviously, I would still perceive you like that. And, if it's okay, if it makes you uncomfortable, grow into it. Like a few years down the line, and then you'll be like, Tarusha was right. I was the OG.
If I ever feel like that, I'll call you and tell you that.
Yeah, but you are too humble that way. But okay, now tell me about BuildersTribe, because that it's such a wonderful community that you guys have built, you and Pareen, and we've kind of talked about it when he was here on the podcast as well, that you guys were actually sort of evaluating your first cohort at that point. And so it's been quite a journey, and now I think you guys are doing something in the metaverse as well, correct?
Yeah, not BuildersTribe, but yes, I can touch upon both projects here. So okay. Lumos was the project that kind of worked on the developer side of things, and I actually moved away from Lumos because my heart was primarily with startups. And we tried doing the whole BuildersTribe thing within Lumos back in the day. And hey, look, when you're taking money from a chain, you are kind of subservient to the mandate that you onboarded. And you can't really bat for the founder in there. So that's something that I learned the hard way. And that was one of the reasons why we started BuilderStripe separately with Pareed. Lumos still works on the developer side of things, and Kavya runs it, who was my co-founder there, and she's probably a much better leader for that company than I was. And so her vision for the developer ecosystem is this large metaverse that kind of facilitates almost real-time conversations with people who are custodians of new technology and people who want to adopt it. And I really think that I'm very excited for what's to happen there, and I support it in an advisory capacity right now. BuildersTribe was our take on what would an incubator look if it was decentralized, right? And we spent a lot of time kind of doing this, and I have some experience of having done accelerators for Web3 specifically. It's very clear for me that a serious Web3 founder does not have the time for a cohort-like sit down and learn things for 3 months and then figure out what happens next, right? The second big thing that we learned is, the space changes almost every week, every month, and there's a new paradigm there, and there's no way in which a centralized set of people can have the network or consume the knowledge to be able to meaningfully support people working on the frontier. So in the whole Web3 way, what we did was we put together a large community of people who have done this 0 to 1 journey before, which is an entrepreneur, a founder, an early employee, which is an early investor who's seen this journey kind of pan out across multiple companies, and some funds who are sitting on a lot of collective intelligence on the bets that they took on spaces and how it actually transpired. With this, what we have now is a large community of people whose incentives are already aligned to help a startup. What BuilderStribe does is we evaluate startups, and we've been blessed with good deal flow because of that. Just actually because both Parin and I are slowly turning into dinosaurs into this space, because we don't get the plays that come to us, and we've been around, so we know the channels where these startups are. So we get a lot of access to them, and then we filter them on a very first principles founder driven basis, which is that does the founder have conviction about the play? Does the play itself need to be decentralized? And is this the right person to do the job? And based on these very fundamental filtering, we then expose this tribe to these startups that we have filtered. While doing this, there is a service fee that we collect in the form of network allocation. And most of it is redistributed back to the tribe based on the founder's consent and the key members in the tribe who can actually help the startup. So that way you're already kind of invested in the success of the startup, and your mentorship and your investment is definitely going to be more thought out than what it would be if we were controlling the entire operations. And so far, I think we've spoken to about 650 startups, 650 projects over the last 7 months or so. And 14 of them are working with us right now, pretty selective about who we work with. And 6 of them have gone on, are very close to going public as networks right now. And it seems to be working at some level. Now the point is to be able to scale it without the operating team being involved. And that's what, most of our time.
That is like the challenge for any scaling company. Like that is exactly where I think we are as well. How do you sort of scale this without the core team being involved in everything?
Yeah, that's the Web3 way, the community owns and runs the organization as opposed to people. And this gives it equitable redistribution of wealth, and at the same time, insane scaling capabilities, because your limit is how big the network can get. And if you can solve for coordination between this, then you built a new paradigm. And that's what I'm very excited about I mean, that's what gets me out of bed to, sit in the slog the way we do right now.
Yeah, no, that's a tremendous problem to solve. As you said, it'll create a whole new paradigm, right, for your particular platform or for others to learn from it as well. So, okay, now moving on to, some trends as such in the space now, NFTs have kind of have so many use case scenarios. Do you have like a take of any kind of a favorite NFT project that you've seen of late?
Look, I think fundamentally I look at NFT as gating and access mechanism more than the fact that it's, I think a very good friend of mine from Ishita from Woodstock Fund, right? Like she says that it's actually more important that it's non-fungible than the fact that it's a token. And that really stuck with me for a really long time. What do I want to make non-fungible? And my identity, my characteristics, my capabilities, my talents, if I could organize like-minded people based on, if I could make that non-fungible, then I can organize a lot of people with the same characteristics or at least the same beliefs. And I think the best NFT projects are the ones that have caught on to this. Sure, the speculation drives a bit of short-term growth in the volumes and things like that. But best NFT projects that I've seen, I mean, like for example, I've been lucky enough to know a few Bored Ape owners, and I asked them,
right,
like, this is worth so much money, would you ever want to sell it? They told me, and they're pragmatic about it. They tell me, look, I hope the day doesn't come that I have to, because the value that I get out of being a part of this community, because I'm a Bored Ape owner, is more than the dollar value that is associated with owning a Bored Ape itself. And that to me is the hallmark of a great NFT project. The use cases of NFTs kind of being put into, general dApps is pretty insane, right? Like I don't know if you guys have checked out Developer DAO. I absolutely love how segmented developers and denoted that using NFTs. And I think that's a brilliant use case. Now, what I've created is a very accurate segmentation of a developer audience that I got. And this is a problem that we had in the Web2 world. Not every great algorithmic coder is a great product guy, and vice versa. Right? And how do I identify these people when I target them using top of the line method? The NFT is a great answer to do that. Developer DAO does a phenomenal job of doing it. Of course, there are DAYC, for example. It sounds like a cliche right now.
Right.
I like it for the fact that they've been able to create this high power community that identifies themselves more than what the society labels them for. And I think this is one part that most of the people don't get it. Even I didn't get it until I met people who, held on to their Bored Apes forever. That really kind of gave an entire new perspective for me. And anything that I want to be untamperable with and easily, transferable, make it easily transferable, right from certificates, invoices, and those sort of stuff. I think those more mainstream use cases will come up over time. But, as of now, a pure play NFT project, I'm looking at what is it gating and what is it organizing. And if that community has inherent value, then the NFT for me also is something that is worth holding on.
Right. It's all about the community after all. I think, community is becoming, it was always supposed to be big, but I think now that, we are at a place in our journey where we really realize that this is what is really moving things along. People used to think on a macro level that, okay, it's the influencers or the ways that are moving the market. But ultimately, if you have community on your side, you can yourself be in that position. Correct?
Yeah, that's true. It is the power of the crowd over the power of the few, right?
Right.
Web3 movement.
Yeah.
And and a good articulation of that power of the crowd is community that come together on certain beliefs and certain capabilities.
Absolutely. Okay, so now we are kind of we're running out of time, but I would like to ask you if there are people who are looking to sort of get in this space, right? And they are making the transition from Web 2 to Web 3. What would be the kind of resources that you would point them towards, or people?
Okay, let me. It depends on what they want to do, right? And what their core skill sets are. If it is on startups and if you want to kind of start something new in this space, actually, even before that, right? Fundamentally, read the Bitcoin white paper. I think it's a beautiful piece of math that is worth putting the time and effort in trying to understand it. Like that perhaps teaches the ethos of decentralization. And I wish I had done that a lot earlier than when I actually got around to doing it, because a lot more things make sense now. And then if you want to be able to build a
Right.
comfortable layer on this immutable network that has been built, read the Ethereum yellow paper. And if you have the stomach for it, please read the entire white paper, because
Right.
especially if you're a builder and if you want to build
It's a
things,
little technical.
yeah,
Yeah.
these two resources, I think, really provide great foundations to what this world actually looks like. Post that, I think, A16Z Startup School is a good way to understand how ventures are built on top of in the Web3 world. I think it at least gives you a good framework. But apart from that, a lot of the information is quite fragmented. There's no one-stop shop which I can just go and learn. There's no textbook for this. And based on this fundamental knowledge, based on some peripheral stuff like the A16Z Startup School things, then post that I can I would say enter the wild west of Twitter and try to weed out the noise and follow the founders of these of some of the projects that you think that you really like. I think especially if they're a little more active on Twitter, you can learn a lot passively based on what they're tweeting and the resources that they tweet.
Right.
And also, strangely, Web3 is like just so accessible. Writing to them more often than not gives you a response, and you could just get on a call with them and try and get your questions answered. I'd also say work in a Web3 first organization to understand what it is like before, if you have intentions of starting up. I just generally think that sets expectations of what you want to do and what you shouldn't be doing very well before you start your own. So if you're making that jump, learn the fundamentals first, which is Bitcoin and Ethereum, and then try to check out some of the organized content streams, especially with A16Z Crypto School, and then get on Twitter and follow the founders of companies that do a lot of these projects that you look up to. And I think you would be well and truly on your way to trying and understanding this space better, because 6 years on, I think I'm just starting to understand bits of it, and be ready to put in that time, because I'm sure if you're smarter, you probably figure it out a little earlier, but it's very, very early days, and most people I know are groping in the darkness.
Yep, same. That is what I was about to say. I feel like every day I'm just groping in the darkness only. And I've been around for some years, and I feel like I'm still learning. There is something new and exciting every day. That is what gets me out of bed, because there's something new to learn every day. You go on Twitter and there are people talking about these exciting things that almost seem sci-fi, and they have actually implemented it. And that is what is exciting about Web3 for me. That you can learn so much and you can give back. Once you do learn, then you can pull so many up along with you.
Yep. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, so it's wonderful. I think, as I said, we are like cult leaders following people to sort of come in and join the Web3 world, because I do truly believe that this is the future, and you're going to be doing yourself a favor if you're going to at least look at it and try to explore it. Because I haven't heard of anybody who kind of looked and learned a little, went down this rabbit hole and came out and were like, okay, not for me.
That's true. Once you're in, there's no going back.
Yeah.
That's it. The rabbit hole reference is very, very true for crypto.
Yeah, you can't really go back. You're in. But then that is what I want. I want people to explore it, because we get so much in our own comfortable in our own echo chambers. I believe that we tend to think we're talking to the same people, right? People who are so passionate about Web3 and they're builders in the space. And we kind of forget that there is a large populace who is not even looking this way, apart from just hearing the crypto aspect of it. Okay, there is crypto exchanges and there is trading involved, and it can be perhaps a way to sort of create an income stream. But there is so much more to Web3 than that.
True. For me, I'm getting to meet a lot of my heroes,
Right.
from Web2 world right now, who are looking at Web3, and I make it a point to go and thank them for looking at this space, because they bring a sense of traditional legitimacy to the space.
Right.
I couldn't be happier that they are in the space, and it's happening slowly but surely.
No, it's so amazing. Like Santosh is working on foundership, right? And I was so in awe of him. Like he built Explorer and everything, and I was thinking that okay, he's gonna come into Web3, and experience does matter so much. Like even if you're coming from Web2, Web1, wherever you're coming from, but you're coming from experience, you've learned something. Tech is tech. It might have some iterations, but ultimately when people are coming in and building amazing things. You can't help but be, like you feel a little prouder of being in this space yourself.
That's true. That's true. And yeah, and also, one thing about Web3 is that I feel like it's just because of how fast the space moves and how quickly paradigms change.
Right.
It's all optimized for very short-term thinking. And a lot of the traditional long-term roll up your sleeves and be committed to the problem for a really long time, right? That's very, very common in Web2. And a little bit of that in Web3 is not such a bad thing, and that's one of the things that excites me most when I see these old players who have been there and done that in Web2, the Web2 OGs, as you'd like to call them. when they enter this space, I'm like, yes, like these guys can really bring in something that, Web3 is missing. And,
Absolutely.
And I'm looking forward to more of that.
Absolutely. I completely agree. I think it's a very exciting time. Now that so many people are transitioning from Web 2 and moving to Web 3 and at least looking at it with some interest. I think, as you said, that kind of brings some legitimacy and some credibility to Web 3 as well. And I am banking on their experience. I think that, we have so many young entrepreneurs who are in their early 20s, etc., who are building fabulous products and, trying to scale companies. But then as, scale, there are problems that companies face when you're scaling that are very different from a company that is kind of bootstrapped. So this experience is only going to help, I think.
I agree.
Thank you so much, Raghu. This has been so lovely. Like, it was just like chatting with you on like any of our calls, but it was so insightful and so lovely. It's always great to talk to you. Any parting thoughts before we wrap this up?
Thanks for having me on board, Tarusha. And you've been around for a while, and I'm always excited when there's something new that comes out of the Oro Pocket and Uniform family. And I'm looking forward to what's in store with what you guys are launching in the near future. So that's probably my only parting thought. Guys, follow Tarusha, follow Mohit, and check out the cool stuff that they're doing.
You're just too kind. You're very kind. But thank you so much for always being there and letting us vent to you and brainstorm with you. We are very, very grateful. I'm incredibly grateful that our paths crossed, and I think I'll always hold you in a lot of gratitude. So thank you for taking out the time. I know you have a sick, busy schedule, and thank you for speaking to me today.
Thanks for having me, Tarusha. I really enjoyed it.